Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a truly shocking story. A former maid who once worked at Graceland has finally broken her silence and revealed the truth about Elvis Presley. After decades of keeping quiet, she's come forward with details that could completely change the way we see the king of rock and roll. Do you believe this story? If you do, drop a 1 in the comments, and if you don't, type 0. Don't forget to like the video and hit that subscribe button to support the channel and make sure you don't miss any of our next jaw-dropping stories. All right, let's get into it. For more than a decade, she quietly stood by his side, preparing his meals, neatly folding his shirts, and most importantly, becoming the only person he truly trusted to confide in. One day, as their eyes met, he made the decision to open up and share a secret he had never dared to tell anyone else. He asked her to promise to keep it between them, a secret that only Elvis had the courage to reveal when no one else was around. Before the name Elvis Presley became the symbol of an entire generation, before he was hailed as the king of rock and roll, he was just a young man with ordinary habits and a loneliness few ever saw. Very few people had the chance to witness that side of him, except for individuals like Nancy Rooks, the woman who was trusted enough to enter Elvis's most private world. Hired in 1967 to work at the Graceland estate, Nancy didn't just cook and clean. She became a witness to a very different Elvis, a man struggling with the pressures of fame, searching for peace in warm meals and simple, heartfelt conversations. She spoke of the quiet mornings when Elvis would sit alone in the kitchen, wrapped in a robe, sipping his coffee, his gaze distant as if he were listening to a song no one else could hear. To Nancy, Graceland wasn't a symbol of luxury. It was a fragile fortress, a place where a man clung to the last fragments of his privacy. Amidst the gold-trimmed rooms and carpeted hallways, her memories captured not the stage icon, but a soul constantly yearning to just be himself. There were nights when Graceland was eerily quiet, and in that stillness Elvis Presley appeared not as a shining star, but as a man seeking peace amid invisible storms. Nancy Rooks once saw him walking down the hallway in the early morning hours, silent, his eyes carrying a sky full of memories. But there were also days when the house seemed to come alive with the sound of piano music from the living room. The music filled the space again. At those moments, Elvis wasn't just singing, he was truly alive. Nancy recalled that whenever Elvis spontaneously sang gospel songs in the kitchen, she couldn't help but join in. Sometimes he'd turn to her half-joking, half-serious, saying, "I'm the best, aren't I, Nancy?" And she would just smile, shake her head, and keep frying eggs as if she were attending a private show from an old friend. To Nancy, he was never a great legend. He was simply Mr. Elvis, a polite man who always remembered to say thank you when offered more coffee. Someone who knew when to be quiet and when to make the whole house laugh. What Nancy remembered most wasn't Elvis's fame, but the way he made her feel seen amid all that spotlight. In a world where everyone wanted something from Elvis, Nancy was simply the woman who cooked his breakfast, and he always made her feel that was important enough to be truly appreciated. Graceland wasn't just a workplace. For Nancy Rooks, it was a closed world, a strange rhythm where time lost all meaning. Each day began and ended without any set pattern, entirely dictated by Elvis Presley's unpredictable moods and schedule. Some nights, just as she lay down to rest, the call bell from upstairs would ring. Elvis would be craving something simple, a few slices of toasted bread, or sometimes golden fried sweet potatoes. Quietly, Nancy would head back to the kitchen, put on her apron again, and start working as if the day had never ended. But Nancy's work was never just about cooking or cleaning. Sometimes she was the first person Elvis saw each morning when he was still half awake in bed, helping him put on his pants and choose a shirt that matched his mood that day. She knew which handkerchief he preferred, which cologne he wore whenever special guests arrived. These small details seemed insignificant, but were the pieces that made up the real Elvis behind the doors of Graceland. Nancy never complained, but she never forgot. Amid the quiet nights spent preparing late meals or tidying the pool area, she saw a different side of him, not the legendary singer, but a lonely man surrounded by people who rarely truly understood him. After many years, when all the spotlight had faded, Nancy chose to share her story in her memoir, Inside Graceland. Elvis's Maid remembers not to criticize, but to tell the truth. To show the world that behind a legend lies a life full of deeply human moments, fragile and heartbreakingly real. Nancy's memoir isn't a cheap attempt to stir up gossip or expose scandal behind the spotlight. Instead, it reads like a gentle letter to the man she quietly watched over for so many years, a figure both great and deeply human. The pages are filled with affection, warm laughter, and memories treasured like precious gems. There's no accusation, no judgment, just an honest perspective from someone who stood behind the scenes. Yet every word she shared held fans breathless, not because of scandal, but because they longed to see Elvis beyond the spotlight, a man with simple habits who enjoyed late-night cookies and wore comfortable silk robes around the house. Nancy recalled that Elvis had a particular love for cleanliness. He might take multiple showers a day, change robes frequently, and always wanted the house neat and smelling fresh. It's in these small details that people discover a very different Elvis, more approachable, more endearing, and sometimes even more vulnerable than what the stage ever revealed. He liked his bacon crispy and his eggs just barely cooked, as if in those small details he found a bit of control in a life that was otherwise chaotic. Nancy noticed that even when he would lean back in his chair, tired with eyes half closed, there was always a moment when he looked around the familiar kitchen as if searching for something lost. Not an object, but perhaps a feeling piece or something close to it. But those details, interesting as they are, aren't the most valuable legacy Nancy leaves behind. Her true legacy is the image of an Elvis no one has ever clearly seen, a man off stage, unfiltered by the camera and free from the public's expectations. Through Nancy's eyes, Elvis appears as a full, complex person, loud and quiet, glorious and lonely. A man who could laugh heartily when the house dogs were being playful, and also have days when he didn't want to say a single word to anyone. If you've made it this far and find the story getting more and more intriguing, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the former maid's revelations are true or just exaggerated? We'd love to hear your opinion. And if you're enjoying this video, be sure to hit the like button and share it with your friends. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming content. As time passed and she realized she didn't have much time left, things began to change noticeably. She started hinting that there were still secrets never revealed, important pieces of the story she had kept hidden for years. And when she declared, "It's time to tell everything," everyone began to wonder what she had been keeping all this time. So in those final days, what did she witness that she chose not to disclose? On the morning of August 16th, 1977, everything seemed to unfold like any other normal morning, at least on the surface. Elvis, as usual, stayed up late. He spent time playing netball with Ginger Alden, his fiancée, and his cousin Billy Smith. That was how he ended the night, or more precisely, the early morning of August 16th of 1977. When Elvis returned to Graceland, Nancy Rooks was busy in the kitchen. She clearly remembered Elvis standing on the doorstep, tired but still polite as usual. Nancy offered him breakfast, as she did every day, but Elvis declined. "No, I just want to sleep a little now, and I only need some water." At that moment, Nancy didn't think much of it since the night had been hot and Elvis had just finished some physical activity. She asked Pauline, another maid, to bring a pitcher of ice water up to his room. Although it was just an ordinary moment, a quiet exchange within the household, Pauline sensed something different. When Elvis took the pitcher, he drank deeply, and quickly his eyes filled with urgency and seeming desperation. Pauline later recalled, "I had never seen him drink water so fervently as he did that morning." Nancy tried to push her worries aside. She thought, "He's probably just tired from playing rate ball." But that moment stayed with her. Around 9:30 a.m., she heard a strange noise from upstairs. It wasn't a loud crash, but something felt off. She paused to listen. There were no screams or calls for help, just an unusual silence, the kind of silence you tell yourself isn't serious. Then she went back to work. Near 1:50 p.m., the intercom system rang and Ginger's voice came through trembling and choked with emotion. "Is someone down there? Something terrible has happened." Nancy's blood ran cold. She asked, "What is it?" Then Ginger broke down crying. At that moment, Nancy realized this was no small matter or simple accident. Something was definitely wrong. She set the phone down and rushed up the stairs, her heart pounding with each step. Turning into the hallway and then the dressing room, she found Elvis lying face down and still on the bathroom floor. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What is this?" She didn't scream or freeze. Instead, she hurried downstairs to find the Memphis Mafia gathered. They needed to know immediately. As the initial shock began to fade, panic started to spread. An ambulance was called and people grew frantic, but Nancy remained calm. When the paramedics arrived, they seemed unsure how to navigate Graceland. Nancy guided them carefully, showing how to carry the stretcher up the stairs and through the narrow corridors. She guided them carefully, telling them when to turn and where to go. When Elvis was finally carried downstairs, she saw him one last time. He looked like he was sleeping. She recalled, though, he had already passed. The bluish marks on his face made it clear. What happened next was a blur, the ambulance sirens, reporters, and crowds. The world lost a legend, Elvis Presley. But for Nancy, it was more than that. She lost Mr. Elvis, the man who once asked her to roll up his pant legs while sharing laughs. As headlines spread, Nancy stayed quietly behind the scenes. The official cause of death, heart failure, nothing more. But even then, she knew something was wrong. There were whispers about medications timelines and what truly happened in those final hours between the moment Elvis drank water and when Nancy found him on the bathroom floor. At the time, she said nothing, keeping it all inside and letting the authorities handle the situation. But decades later, she would revisit that morning once more. This time, she wouldn't just share what she saw, she would speak of her doubts, her regrets, and the things she might have unknowingly kept hidden, the secrets held for many years. For a long time after Elvis's death, Nancy Rooks remained silent, not because she had nothing to say, but because the truth was complicated and painful. But there are boundaries you must never cross, especially when your life is tied to someone like Elvis Presley. She witnessed fans traveling thousands of miles just to stand outside Graceland's gates. She saw them weeping, speaking of Elvis as if they had lost a brother, a friend, a part of themselves. Nancy understood that pain. She shared it, and perhaps that's why she chose silence over speculation. Yet sometimes silence can say a lot. After Elvis's death, Nancy continued working for the Presley family, holding a quiet but important role. She helped transform Graceland from a home into a museum. But there was one part of the house that tourists, reporters, and even most staff never set foot in: Elvis's private upstairs quarters. According to Nancy, Elvis's bedroom and bathroom were only cleaned once or twice a month to keep dust at bay. It was an unspoken rule: no lingering, no questions, no comments. You went in, cleaned, and left. But each time she passed through those rooms, a different feeling took hold of her. She saw the same floor, the same hallway, and the very bathroom where it all ended. Every time she dusted or folded a shirt, the memory of that morning flooded back. She rarely spoke about this publicly and never went into detail. Though her memoir shares many warm and personal stories, Nancy chose to keep the deepest truths private, guarding the memories that only she truly knew. But to those who knew her well, Nancy had moments, small hints, and vague suggestions. She often paused during conversations when certain sensitive topics came up. Her eyes would grow distant, as if lost in deep thought. On one occasion, she reportedly said, "If people knew what I know, they would never listen to his music the same way again." It wasn't a threat, but a warning, a sign of things left unsaid. In the years that followed, many questions began to arise. Why was there so much confusion about the timeline of Elvis's death? Where did the truth lie between the bright lights of the stage and the silent moments in her mind? Why were so many prescription bottles believed to have been removed from the scene before investigators arrived? Why did the toxicology report have to go through multiple revisions before the public saw the final version? And why did people like Nancy, those who were there in those moments, never clarify these gaps? The truth was, she had tried to remain silently discreet, protecting secrets that no one really knew. A few of her close friends claimed that over the years, Nancy had confided in them and always asked them to keep those words private. She admitted that there were things in that bathroom that shouldn't have been there, things that Ginger, Elvis's fiancée, was too devastated to explain, and things that the Memphis Mafia didn't want the police to investigate. One story even suggests that Nancy was asked to clean the area before medical personnel arrived, though she never confirmed this herself. These hints remain vague, but raise a significant question: what secrets lie hidden behind the walls of Graceland? Over time, the weight of those years weighed heavily on her, not with bitterness, but with a quiet burden she carried alone. In her final years, as her health declined, she grew more determined. In an interview shortly before her death, she shared, "I've done what I can for the family, but I feel there's still a story that needs to be told before I'm gone." It wasn't a threat. It was a release. People always assumed Nancy had told everything in her memoir, but what if the most important part was the part she left out? What if on that morning she had seen more than she ever admitted? What if her silence wasn't just loyalty but guilt? Because many decades after Elvis's death, her final words began to take on a new tone, not one of tender reflection, but of urgency, as if she wanted to resolve everything before it was too late. She had spent her life honoring the man she served, but in the end, she hinted that protecting his legacy might have meant hiding part of the truth. And now she wasn't sure if revealing the truth was the right choice. Her final words, soft yet startling, shattered many assumptions about her and Elvis. She never made a public scene or announced it widely. That wasn't who she was. But those closest to her noticed something shift in her during her final months. She became quieter, more resolute, and then one day she quietly declared, "The time has come to tell it all." At first, those around her were puzzled, unsure of what she truly meant. But gradually, those around her realized she was ready to let go of the burden not for attention or drama, but to find peace for herself. Nancy always protected Elvis's image in public, sharing sweet stories, charming memories, and everyday moments that brought fans closer to him. Yet what she never revealed, what she kept hidden for years, were her doubts about what really happened in those final days. A close friend of Nancy's shared that she confided Elvis had been unwell in the weeks before his death, and his condition was far worse than the public knew. He was struggling with his health, facing a fatigue that to her went beyond mere exhaustion. She reportedly said that Elvis was worn down by the medication and exhausted from pretending to live a normal life. She went further, claiming that some of the drugs he was taking weren't legally prescribed. Those close to him were sharing medications without proper oversight. Nancy said she often saw new pill bottles discarded in the trash every day that summer, and she also recalled numerous times when Elvis would suddenly fall asleep in unusual moments, mid-conversation, during meals, even in the middle of sentences. At the time, she thought it was just ordinary fatigue. But now she suspects these were signs of a far more serious problem. Nancy also revealed something she had never discussed publicly: what happened immediately after Elvis was found lying motionless on the bathroom floor. When Ginger Alden, Elvis's fiancée, called downstairs through sobs saying that something terrible had happened, Nancy hurried up as she always did. She saw Elvis lying face down, unresponsive, his body stiff. It was an image she would never forget. Then her instincts kicked in. She ran downstairs to alert the Memphis Mafia, the group who was frequently around to handle emergencies. But before the ambulance arrived, someone whose identity Nancy never disclosed asked her to clean up a bit. At the time, she didn't suspect anything. She wiped the counter, moved a towel, and rearranged a few items. The feeling was just a regular, harmless task, nothing out of the ordinary. But later, Nancy wondered if she had witnessed signs that she hadn't been able to recognize at the time. But when the media storm began and questions about the drugs and the timeline started to surface, Nancy realized what she might have done. She wondered if she had truly hidden something. "I don't know what I was hiding," she said. "I just did what I was told." Those moments, the way Elvis drank water too quickly, or the strange noises she heard that morning, and even the rushed efforts to clean up the scene, haunted her. For years, Nancy had convinced herself that it didn't mean anything, that she was just doing what needed to be done, that nothing was wrong. But in the final months of her life, that feeling began to change. She wasn't sure anymore, and that was when she decided to speak out about something she had never dared to publicly admit, even in her book. It completely changed the way people viewed what had happened. Elvis didn't just die. He faded, Nancy confessed, and no one could stop it. That statement became Nancy's heaviest admission, and that's why in her final days, those close to her said she felt burdened not by what she had done, but by what she hadn't said. In staying silent, was she protecting Elvis, or was she protecting those who had allowed him to leave in that way? Now, with those confessions, it was time for her to speak about everything. The conversation had shifted because she had finally revealed the truth about Elvis. It wasn't because Elvis was a bad person, but because those around him might have let him down. The signs had been clear, and Nancy, in her quiet way, had seen too many signs to ignore, yet chose to pretend she hadn't seen anything. The consequences of that silence were now inevitable. When the news began to spread that Nancy Rooks had left behind more than just a cookbook and a few warm memories, The reaction wasn't immediate, but rather a slow, quiet spread, much like the way she had lived and moved around Graceland, presently observing but never making a fuss. But once people realized what she had truly said, or at least implied, the shock began to spread. Fans were divided. Some refused to believe it. To them, Nancy's memoir was gospel, a testament of unwavering loyalty, the final tribute to the man they revered. But now, the loyal housekeeper was being quoted as saying that Elvis hadn't just collapsed. He had weakened. And worse, she may have inadvertently contributed to cleaning up and smoothing over the scene for the authorities. The idea that anyone close to Elvis might have tampered with evidence, even unintentionally reopened old wounds. This not only confused Elvis's fans, but also sparked a wave of fierce controversy, casting a shadow over the legend of a talented and charismatic man with doubt. The official cause of death always left room for doubt. A sudden heart attack. Yes, but the mix of drugs in Elvis's system, the delayed call for an ambulance, and the lack of complete toxicology reports only raised more questions. All of this flared up, sparking new anger and skepticism. Online forums buzzed with activity filled with speculations and analyses of the timeline of his death. Did Nancy really get asked to clean something up? What did she see that morning? Why didn't she arrive earlier? And who, if anyone, warned her not to do so? These questions seemed to haunt everyone, especially longtime Elvis researchers and biographers who were trying to reconstruct the truth and clarify the details that had been left open. However, there were also those who praised her. They saw Nancy's honesty in her final years as an act of courage. After decades of protecting Presley's legacy, perhaps she had come to realize that truth and respect didn't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. Fans deserved to know that Elvis was not immortal, that even kings can fall sometimes slowly, sometimes in silence, and often with the help of those too afraid to speak out. Presley's legacy remained silent, with no official statements made. Graceland continued to host tours, sell merchandise, and release music as usual. But the staff who had once worked with Nancy, those still behind the scenes, whispered that things were now different. They said a boundary had been crossed, not out of betrayal, but out of love for the man who had once called them family. For Nancy, there was no media tour, no interviews or best-selling books. All she left behind were a few quiet words passed on through those she trusted, and those words turned out to be more powerful than any headline. She didn't need to accuse anyone or point fingers. All Nancy did was share her truth, and that it turned out was enough for the world to view Elvis's death and life in an entirely new light. It wasn't a simple tragedy, but a slow unraveling that so many had witnessed, yet no one dared to stop and face. Nancy had lived her life in the shadows, but when she passed, her voice became the center of attention. The weight of the unanswered questions lingered. Ultimately, Nancy Rooks left behind no scandal, only lingering questions, subtle yet meaningful, that continue to echo long after the headlines have faded. She never intended to harm anyone's legacy, especially not Elvis Presley's. However, her silence and the doubts she shared have become an inseparable part of the story about the man and the mysteries surrounding his death. Nancy's story highlights the delicate balance between loyalty, love, and silence. She lived a quiet life away from the spotlight, yet was an indispensable part behind the scenes at Graceland, witnessing private and mysterious moments in Elvis Presley's life. Whether Nancy waited too long to speak is a difficult question to answer because it touches on deeper aspects of human nature and silence. Nancy was not an investigator or a doctor, but a maid, a quiet witness who saw the gradual changes in a man she deeply cared for. When she finally chose to speak, it may not have been to expose a conspiracy, but to free herself from a burden she had carried for too long. This isn't always easy to understand, especially considering how she remained silent for decades, protecting not only Elvis, but also the legend and symbol he represented. Whether Nancy waited too long to speak or not, her final confession was less about timing and more about a deeply personal choice to find peace within herself. The truths she shared, though not complete, were undeniable and deserved to be acknowledged. By choosing to come forward after years of silence, she found a way to honor Elvis not only through his legacy, but also through the honest reality she experienced. This story goes beyond Elvis Presley's downfall. It reveals the man who lived quietly in the shadows of fame. This is about the people who served them, those who were always present but never spoke up, whether out of fear or loyalty. Nancy Rooks carried that burden alone her entire life, and when she finally spoke out, it wasn't to reveal the truth for others, but to free herself from the shadow she had lived under for so long. Her final confession was not only a way to honor the man she loved, but also a form of personal liberation. It wasn't about punishment or exposure, but about accepting the life she had lived, the things she had witnessed, and the lingering questions, quiet yet heavy with meaning. And that's everything we wanted to share in today's video about the shocking revelations from Elvis Presley's former maid. This story definitely opens up a whole new perspective on the real life behind the spotlight of Elvis Presley. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our exciting stories. Thank you for watching until the end, and we'll see you in the next videos on the channel.